Hello, my name is Nick Nucero, and I will be presenting my tic-tac-toe game coded in React for my final project of platform-based computing. This project took me about 15 hours, and I created this tic-tac-toe game using online tutorials and React guides online to help me decipher React in general and what it is as a new language. Learning this new language was pretty tough, but once I started doing the tutorial, it helped me dive into the language a lot more and understand some of the complexities of it right off the bat. It is inherently a lot different than Java or C#, which are the two languages I'm very familiar with and have worked with in the past. It's different because in React you have components and functions rather than classes. And so in React, a component essentially is a class, except in React, every component has a constructor and a render method. So what a render method does is it returns a lightweight version of what the screen is going to display from that React component, and the constructor obviously just constructs the class itself or the component of React. So the difference between a function and a component in React is that a function, like my square, lacks constructor. Because it lacks constructor, it also lacks having its own values, such as in my board it has an array and a boolean. Because it lacks these things, data must be passed into a function via something called props. Props in React are essentially arguments in Java, and it's what you pass into a function or a component to tell it what it needs to do or what it needs to be. So to run through my code briefly, as it's described in more detail in my report, we have my square, which is just a function. It doesn't have any values of itself. It doesn't maintain its own state, but I pass its class name and what to do when it's clicked. Its onClick method is derived from the next class, which is board. Board is my main class, and it's where most of the bulk of the work happens in my tic-tac-toe game. When I construct my board, I give it an array of 9 slots that are all null, and I give it x is next, a boolean, which I set to true. That makes it so that x is the first move in the game every time. I have my handle click method, which is essentially what the square does on click, and my handle click method does quite a few things, but the most important parts of it are these last few lines, which is where it switches the state of the x and the o, and then sets the state of the square to an x or an o. So that happens right here in the handle click, this .set state. So it will set the state of the current square that it's on, which is passed in via I. And then at that point, that square will be updated and rendered as an x or an o square rather than a blank square. This is the render method of the board. Every component in React is a render method. Every time the game runs, the board is re-rendered. Essentially, the render method just checks if there is a winner here by calling the calculate winner method, which I'll get to later, and then if not, it'll play the game. It renders the board, each square by row, 3 squares to a row. There's my game class or component, and the only thing that does is have some placeholder values for class names. This is my main render method, which is essentially what renders the game each time through. And this is my calculate winner method, which essentially has every possible win condition laid out here in an array of arrays, runs those win conditions through a for loop, and if any of those win conditions, which are all the possible horizontal, vertical, or diagonals, if any of those win conditions are true, it'll return an x or an o, whichever was the winner, or if not, it'll return a null. So in essence, this is a fairly simple game, however, it was a lot of work to get done. So this is a demonstration of the tic-tac-toe game in function. In order to compile my code, I worked locally in Notepad++, as seen here, save my code here, and then when I wanted to compile it, use an online JavaScript compiler. So I would just put my code in here. It's the same code, just put into here. And then from here, you could run the game itself. So as you see here, we'll just do, starts off as player X default. Just play a game with X winning. Okay, refresh the screen. Play a game with O winning. in essence, that's the gist of the game and how it functions and the code behind it. More in-depth descriptions are available in my report. But yeah, that's about it for my video. So have a great day, everyone. That's my game in React.